Yeah, so I've changed the way I garden. I'm really now working with diversity. I'm allowing everything to compete with each other. That includes plant materials, reptiles, birds. Everything is growing together. Everything is helping each other. The birds are bringing endless seeds in here. We're providing them with endless things to eat. The reptiles are benefiting from insects coming in here. The insects are benefiting from all this stuff that they can pollinate and get nectar from. So that circle is very powerful. But the problem is most gardeners never get to experience that. It's human nature that gets in the way. We want to control our gardens. We want these rows and columns, and we want everything to be just perfect. But in reality, if we duplicate nature, the plants do better. The garden looks better. That's a taste thing. There's a lot of people that are super strict on, organizing their gardens to be something that they think is the right way. So this idea of having fruit trees mixed in with these ornamentals and having everything grow together is it's an art form. You have to actually learn it. It is not something that you can do right away. You have to experience these plants competing for space. You have to experience them thriving together. It's not easy to learn, and as a gardener it's very hard to make that change. I'll tell you how I do it. I always have minimum five of the same plant that I stagger, so they're not a circle or a square, they're organic. So 5 of one plant, then next to them, touching them, I'll put another 5, then another 3, another 6 on the other side. So you have this area where everything is competing for space and sunlight. And what happens is there seems to be this mechanism where everything works together to try to keep every single type of plant alive. It's very powerful if you include that diversity into your garden, but the diversity is in close proximity. That is very important. A lot of people will, 60 centimeters apart, 80 centimeters apart. That applies for bigger trees or fruit trees, or you need the proper distance for them. But these types of smaller plants, work them in with each other. Let them figure it out for themselves, and it works incredibly well. Yeah, I want to put a date in here. This is January 21st, and I want to talk about the energy required to grow a garden like this. And there's a bunch of variables that make it possible or not possible. The first one is I like to have no bare soil. Like, I don't want any soil showing. And that is like, I don't know if I put a number on it, a 20% bonus right off the bat by not having any soil exposed to this really strong sunlight in Ecuador. Number 2 is that these plants are sending nutrients back into the ground, and I would put a 30 on that, 30%. So I'm at 50% self-sufficiency already by having these plants living together, covering the ground, and working full tilt. The next issue is moisture. I have lots of moisture around. It rains all the time. Sun is the only element we could have more of, and heat. We have very little heat here. It's always 20 degrees. So always look at your bottlenecks. Do you have enough water? Do you have enough energy in your soil? Can you cover the ground with something? All those things make such a difference in this type of gardening process. Energy is key, but having this massive amount of growth produces so much energy on its own. Yeah, it's really important to understand when you have diverse plants in one area, let's say a square meter, those plants will contribute diverse micronutrients and energy back into the soil. The number is they give 30% of their energy back to the ground. So if you have all these different sugars and micronutrients going into the ground, guess what? Your soil microbes and everything that lives in the soil is going to be diverse as well. Why? Is because you're giving them diverse food to digest and to process and to turn back into food that the plants can take back up again. So remember, every square meter should have diverse plants on it so that the soil itself is fed really good, rich, diverse nutrients and sugars. And guess what? Your plants will thrive because they're being fed all this diversity. Yeah, diversity also requires the gardener to create canopies. It requires the gardener to create diverse layers. Layering your garden, having taller plants, lower plants, ground covers, having all these layers gives your garden diversity, but it also gives it a lot of energy, because what happens is the higher canopy plants are protecting the lower ones from the bright sunlight here in Ecuador. So if you can layer your diversity, layer your plant material, have little cubby holes for reptiles and even little rabbits or whatever it may be, attracting wildlife and diversity, or diverse wildlife and diverse pollinators to your garden is a big part of successful gardening. It is actually such a help having all this life and all this energy working together to create chaos, jungle-like settings. Diversity is the key to all this.
Just remember, plant diversity creates pollinator diversity. You won't believe what type of insects show up if you have enough flowers for them. This diversity attracts these immensely different insects and birds to your garden. Be amazed what shows up. There's so many specialized insects in Ecuador here that show up and use their instrumentation to get into flowers that nobody else can get inside. Butterflies use flowers as resting points and charge their batteries. Hummingbirds and other types of pollinator birds are everywhere. It's up to you if you want to attract this diverse life into your garden. If your reptiles are sunbathing everywhere and are feeling comfortable, you've done a great job.
Yeah, so if you enjoy pollinators coming to your garden, if you enjoy having reptiles, if you enjoy having hummingbirds, if you enjoy having strange looking birds, strange looking insects coming to your yard, it's the food equation, the flower equation. You need to provide as many different flowers as you can. Like, the more flowers you are offering to your insects and to your hummingbirds and other birds, the more they will show up.
It is really important to remember to have your garden loaded with different flowers.
This entire valley has almost nothing flowering. It's like really strange. They come here because there's all this diverse nectar ready for them. So attract everything into your garden by that food equation. Have diverse nectar, diverse food, seeds for all the animals that are in the surrounding areas. If you provide them with that offering, guess what? They will show up. There's no way that they won't show up. It's incredibly interesting what incredibly diverse insects we're attracting to this place, just because we have so many different flowers that simply aren't available to these pollinators and birds and other animals. Okay, let's talk about the food equation of a garden like this, where everything is growing in between each other. Our fruit trees are doing beautiful. They are growing so fast. The food production is so easy. It is, I don't even know how to describe it to you. It is secondary for us. It's not the most important thing in the garden, but it's doing incredibly well because of this diversity, dragging all the fruit trees along, dragging all the vegetables along. Everything is growing like almost too fast and too well. So if you can get that diversity going, and if you can understand the benefits of having flowers in between and fruit trees growing everywhere and getting, fruit all the time, it's because plants that are grown like this, they feel incredibly comfortable and they enjoy the company of everything around it, and they work together in such a way that everything grows so much faster and so much more prolific. So if you put food, growing food, as a secondary element in your garden, a lot of times the benefits will be larger than if you had rows and columns. It's interesting. It's interesting how secondary vegetable growing a lot of the times be the main energy that comes out for your kitchen. So remember that not necessarily do you have to put all your energy into growing food. A lot of times you have to make your food feel comfortable where it is growing. From our river, it's chewed up sticks and leaves and whatever you can imagine, and it's got a bit of a grainy sand in it. This here is different. It's from the river, but what it is, wow, we have no worms. There's a worm in here. What this is in the river, but it's starting to grow plants. So you can see the improvement from this to that just by the fact that there's life and plant material growing inside this material. This material is actually, I'm really happy we have this on our land because I'm using this to propagate plants. The clay content, what it does is it's behind the house, this stuff. There's lots of it. I have to filter out all the rocks, but I'm happy to have it because it retains a lot of moisture. It's a very usable material for, you know, creating areas where you can start cuttings and seeds. This material, oddly enough, is maybe 5 feet away from this in the back. So look at the difference. Is high in organic matter. It's from the runoff from the mountain that's above us. This probably is original, and this is the runoff, the leaves that have decomposed, the sticks, whatever the material is. This has a lot of organic material. This one here happens when we have lots of river activity. This is a very fine sand, and again, I'm incredibly happy to have this because I can use it, for example, in other soils to make it a lot more fluffy. This here, let me call this my original soil. So this is the soil I have on 90% of my land in the down below area. So the river has made this, let's say over the last 100,000 years or whatever it is. So this is what I'm mainly dealing with. And if you can identify what your main soil is, then you can condition it to improve the existing material that is the majority of your land. This here is from trench composting and using the leaves from the river. It is where we want to end up. This is a really beautiful material. So by knowing the end goal, I'm way ahead of the game. I know that I want all these materials that are on this table to end up like this. So this is really important for me to know what I want to end up with in terms of getting to this great material. Try to analyze what you have on your land, how you can combine these different materials to end up with your perfect soil. It's very important that you have the chance to analyze this setup. How do you get from this type of material to something that you can really grow in? And if your property provides all those parts, then use it to your advantage. So I'm going to show a couple of things here. So I'm just going to do some soil math with you. So if I took a handful of this, took a handful of this, took a handful of this, took the rocks out, let me put another little handful here, then I take another handful of this great working river growth, and if I mix these three together efficiently, you can see already And I haven't filtered any of this. This is raw coming out of the ground. So if you see this, I can almost push that over to here and be content with that. Now if I have something growing inside here, this would turn into this very, very quickly. So remember, if you have the components, you can make any type of soil from the materials that you have in your own garden or your own acreage. You can make whatever you want as long as you know what you have on your property. We have all kinds of other materials like leaves and grass cuttings and all those things, but those are more in the composting area. You can always add them to this. And what happens is if you really pay attention to what you have, you might be able to be soil self-sufficient in your own garden, and you don't need to bring in all kinds of expensive materials.